Today we're starting a new unit. We are looking at sacred spaces and rituals. And for our first piece, we're looking at what is kind of considered the basis or the earliest form of architecture. And it's called Stonehenge, and it's located in England.
So this is really, when you think of architecture, this is the foundation for everything we know about architecture. This is one of the earliest examples of architecture after humans stopped being more like cave dwelling and,
moving around as hunters and gatherers,
Yes.
and they were trying to establish places where they would stay for long periods of time.
Right.
So we're talking about 3000 BCE, and this is still part of the Neolithic era, but they are starting to farm and domesticate animals and kind of...
There's some sense of stability, and with that comes the security of, being able to explore cultural norms and developing your own culture within a group of people. So that's where we might see some early indications of different religions and ceremonies and things that were specific to just certain groups of people.
Right, so that's why this is part of sacred spaces and rituals. So when you think of architecture, I think people tend to think of enclosed spaces, which this definitely was not. You can kind of see what it looks like today. It's in ruins, but even when it was first created 5,000 years ago, it was not enclosed. It wasn't an enclosed space. So the reason
there's no roof or anything to protect you from the elements.
So the reason this is considered architecture, different things are considered architecture, bridges and things like that, but it has what's known as the post and lintel construction. So you can see that the vertical beams are the posts and the horizontal pieces are known as the lintels, and that is, like we said, an early beginning for architecture. Even a doorway today is kind of that post and lintel construction.
I mean, if you were to think of the kind of things you might build as a small child out of Lincoln logs or Play-Doh, it might actually look very similar to this.
Right. So some of y'all might be looking at this and wondering, okay, you're doing the math in your head 5,000 years ago. How did they go about constructing something like this? And if you look at the original photos, very mathematically precise. The way they're arranged in a perfect circle, and they obviously had to curve the stones to kind of get that circular piece to them on the lintels. And there's a lot we don't still know about Stonehenge. Mostly it's kind of making educated guesses based on...
It's clear that there was some sort of measuring, that there was some sort of system in place for transporting the stones, getting them from point A to point B. And then the super weird thing is that these stones were not found in that immediate area. They were stones that had to be, selected and then somehow moved many, many miles to bring them to this location.
Then they had to be carved and then stood upright. And then this is all without any modern technology. And so the fact that they did that in and of itself is remarkable. But we also know that 2 times a year, this is used as kind of almost a calendar. It helps to track the days. So on the summer solstice, which is the longest day of the year, and the winter equinox, which is the shortest day of the year, the sun rises through the heel stone and perfectly hits the altar stone. So that's important because from there they can start tracking when should we plant, when should we harvest, when is this religious ceremony.
Right. And, the seasons may have a really significant impact on their day-to-day lives, especially with farming and all that, but also from a spiritual perspective. And we also know that this was a burial site. So there are small mounds that are surrounding Stonehenge, and you wouldn't really notice them if you were there walking around. It's just like a little bump in the ground. But we know that there are a lot of people who were buried there. So there's absolutely significance to a burial site as well.